Welcome to Live Forum 2021 from Washington, D.C., and with the whole National Association of Workforce Board crew. I'm Ron Painter, your host, and I am absolutely delighted to welcome one of our keynote speakers, Chef Jeff Henderson from Vegas.
Yes.
Jeff, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Chef Jeff, if I can say that, is an award-winning chef, best-selling author and popular public speaker, and an ex-offender, having served nearly a decade in prison for drugs, having run kitchens as executive chef at the renowned Cafe Bellagio and Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. He has become one of the most inspirational African-American chefs in the country. In 2001, Jeff made history in Vegas when he became the first African-American named chef de cuisine at Caesar's Palace. He eventually became an executive chef at several top restaurants, including Cafe Bellagio, where he worked until 2006. He has been on the New York Times bestseller list. He has appeared in numerous TV and broadcast, Oprah, and all of the crew. I think for us, probably one of the most important things is the Chef Jeff Project and Jeff's work with young people in trying to keep them out of prison and choose a different path.
Yes.
Jeff, again, welcome and thanks for joining me.
My pleasure.
An incredible keynote yesterday talking about life in prison and really coming out of prison. What was it like after a decade coming out?
Well, it wasn't easy. It wasn't a walk in the park. You know, when you're in prison, you're like in a time warp. The world stops. And so the world evolves on the outside and you're still in prison for those 10 years. So readjusting, coming back into the community, being around people that wasn't out to get you. In prison is a place to where, you know, you learn how to use the eyes behind your head. You live on edge. You know, it's a place that's dangerous, that any day a riot can jump off or things of that nature. But coming out to the outside world, working with people, communicating with people who haven't been to prison, I had to learn that all over again. I had to learn to, you know, what it feels like to walk on carpet, to go into a grocery store and to have choices of what you wanted to eat that day. I mean, it was like earth moving for me, you know. Yes, I mean, the little things that you take for granted.
Yeah.
You know, you go in a grocery store, you grab what you want and you leave. When I came home from prison, I went in a grocery store, I looked at every shelf, every aisle, from the freezer department to the meat department and to the vegetables. It was like, my God, things have really changed.
What was, like, we look at the recidivism rate, and it's pretty high.
Yes.
When you came out, what sustained you? What helped you choose a different path?
I think what sustained me is that because the 10 years I was in prison, I just didn't lay down and play the victim card. You know, I made a conscious decision early in my incarceration that I was going to work on me, becoming a better me. And I went to school, I earned my GED along with 27 other certificates. I was very active in inmate programs, from the Black Culture Workshop to Toastmasters, even to a mastermind. There was a think tank in the prison where you would have a diverse group of men. Every Sunday would come into the prison library and a topic on race, politics, current events would be thrown on the table. You had Jewish men, Muslim men, Christian men, radical men. You had men from all walks of life, from social economic backgrounds. So I really learned the art of debate and to be a critical thinker. I learned to cook in prison, which became the foundation of my dream of becoming a chef. You know, food found me in that very dark place. So I was laser focused when I came home from prison. I knew what I wanted to do. I evolved while I was in prison. My value systems have changed, and renewed value systems, and just the fact that I was free again. The most important, the most valuable gift to any human is your freedom, and you don't really you can't comprehend that until it's taken from you. So I just love beauty, life, and this. I just was embracing like wind when I came out.
That certainly comes across when we got to see you speak and participate. One of the things so food led you to some really great experiences, but it's also led you to reach out and teach. Can you talk to us about the Chef Jeff project?
Wow. I've been extremely blessed and fortunate to have built some great relationships coming out of prison based on my work ethic and my passion and my love of cooking. And throughout my 25 years of being out of prison, I always said that I wanted to pay it forward. I wanted to give back. I wanted to help fix my wrong because I was an influencer back in the 80s on the street. One generation watched me, then the next generation watched that generation, which created a direct pipeline from the inner city to the prison system. And so right in the middle of the pandemic, my wife and I launched a nonprofit 501c3 called the Chef Jeff Project Relaunch, which is a relaunch of my Food Network show, where we take at-risk young people who are directly impacted by the juvenile justice system, foster care system, young people who are high-functioning autistic, young people who have embraced criminal lifestyles, failing in school, just stuck in life. And we brought them into our kitchen, and we use culinary arts as a therapeutic tool, as an activity to deal with the trauma that many of these young people went through. Our goal is not to create the next top chef. Our goal is to create the next top human. So we don't force culinary on these young people. We help them figure out what their gift is, the one thing that they do extremely well. And then I bring in subject matter experts to help them evolve that vision. And we do personality tests. We do career tests. We do field trips, because exposure is the foundation to evolution. When kids get to see, hear, and experience things outside of that bubble they live in, it allows them to become who they're really supposed to be.
When you're speaking, you talk a lot about your experiences in school. As we think about how do we reach young people and we talk to them about opportunities, what was your observation looking back on your experiences coming through school and your experiences in getting skill development?
Wow. It's interesting. Looking back when I was a young kid, there has always been a disconnect from public education to young people who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. There's always been a cultural and emotional connect from educator to student, because the lived experiences are different. It's very difficult to connect with someone when you don't know them or where they come from or the trauma or the lived experiences they may have had in their life.
Jeff, one of the things, obviously, one of the 800-pound gorillas in the room is the issue of race in this country.
Yes.
And inequality. How do you bridge that chasm between experiences, between the experiences of, you talked about when you were a kid getting on the bus and you were bused to a suburban school. How do we reach across that chasm and reach some understanding of race relations in the U.S.?
Well, race issues have always been here. Over the past, 10, 15 years, it's become more open. People are starting to talk about it based on things that have taken place in the country, from police brutality over police Black and brown communities, gang violence, and poverty. The social economic gap is widening and widening. And I really think it boils down to education, it boils down to access and opportunity. But it also boils down to people who are below the poverty line to understand that they need to be educated. They need to not depend on government and social programs, that we from our community have to begin to say, okay, what could I do to change my own trajectory in life? We can no longer sit around and wait for a handout. and take advantage of all the opportunities in this country that so many immigrants who fight and crawl to come to this country get here and say, oh my God, it's the land of opportunity. So at some point, that needs to be the dialogue. The dialogue needs to be, how do we close that economic gap? And it's through education, it's through understanding, it's through opportunities, and it's through access. And that's one of the biggest challenges, I believe, is the disenfranchised getting access to the opportunities that can, elevate one's income status.
You do a lot of the Chef Jeff Project does a lot of what I would call teaching in the moment, taking
Yes.
the opportunity of experience to teach. Would you like to see more of that? Do we need to be doing more of that? That's sometimes hard to do, but is that more of the education pathway we need to see in order to make that opportunity real?
Absolutely. I think workforce development boards are in a very strategic position to really, really impact the outcomes of disenfranchised people through education. But also incorporating people with lived experience. When you look at a lot of workforce boards and you look at a lot of these committees, a lot of those committees and boards aren't a reflection of the people who benefit from workforce dollars. So I think integrating people from the lived experience that the workforce boards and service providers are offering, it needs to reflect that. I think understanding and connection to especially grassroots organizations. So I say, come out of the boardroom, come out of the corporate offices, and let's put our boots on. Let's get in the community to try to build a better dialogue and a cultural and emotional connection, because that will truly help in the decision making. Because even myself, as new into the nonprofit space, 9 months, I find it very challenging navigating how to access, the WIOLA dollars and, all the different funding that's coming. So I think there needs to be more boot camps. I think a lot of the money needs to go directly to the organizations that's, the small organizations in the community that's touching these people's lives every single day versus so many of the huge nonprofits that are just, they're there, they're doing great work, but, heavy staff and heavy, like that, but more into the community. And
You
that's
have a
what we
good
focus
partner
on.
in the Las Vegas board. You talked about that. Their director Jaime Cruz
Yes.
and the crew there.
Yes.
So great to have that good experience.
Absolutely. I mean, Jaime Cruz and that whole workforce board in Vegas have really been doing some creative stuff in terms of outreach, connecting with a lot of grassroots organizations. They've been holding my wife and I's hand through this process to access the funding because we're a self-funded nonprofit. We went into our retirement in the midst of the pandemic, opened the kitchen, signed the lease, bought the equipment, and, we do it all out of our pocket. So I think that Jaime and those guys, the workforce board there in Vegas, have really helped us understand and have clarity on the next steps in terms of getting some funding.
So wrapping up, is part of the message, Jeff. If we're going to reach young people that don't traditionally learn the way we think they should, if we're going to bridge the gap between white, black, brown, is part of this just accepting that it's an uncomfortable experience and just get on with it?
Yes. It can be uncomfortable interacting and engaging with folks that you normally have, the least amount of interaction with. I think coming together, understanding each other, and working as a unit, because collaboration is key to helping solving some of these issues, especially with our young folks. And as I advocated yesterday during my keynote, why the young people really need to be a priority, because they're our future. They're our future workforce boards, they're our future leaders, our future businessmen and entrepreneurs. So we need to make an investment, a bigger, stronger investment, especially disenfranchised young folks, because these young people have so much talent. They're so gifted, but they learn untraditionally. It's not in a book like my kids. Are you familiar with a reduction of a sauce?
Yes.
So for my kids, we'll have a liquid in a pot, and instead of saying we're going to reduce this to 1/4, and so I say, I take a Sharpie and I put outside the pot. I said, when this liquid here drops down to this line, it's going to be ready, versus saying a reduction, because they're just not in tune with, culinary or a particular skill set. Young kid wants to be a plumber. You bring a toilet in and you give him the tool, you put it in his hands, you show him how to do it. He has it, but he's not going to get it out of a book, because we just don't learn that way. And I think through the lived experiences that we had, and not valuing education young, or our parents being uneducated, is, we just learn differently.
Chef Jeff Henderson, thank you very much for joining us. It
pleasure.
was a pleasure for us to have you come and teach us. And I wish you all the world of success. And certainly, if we can be helpful, you have a friend here at NAWB.
Appreciate that. Thank you much.
You've been listening to Live at Forum 2021. I'm your host, Ron Painter. Hopefully, Forum 2022, you're here live. For the National Association of Workforce Boards, thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.